Welcome to the Find My Catalyst podcast. We all have problems we're looking to solve, and we know that there are solutions out there, but we struggle with this. How do we find that solution? Where does the nudge come to help us take the next step and start solving tough problems? Well, that's the intention of this podcast, is to help you find your catalyst and take that next step. I'm Mike Simmons. Today, I am joined by Michelle Baker. Michelle and I met through Dan Cockrell's group, the Perch. This conversation, this podcast, as all of them, are brought to you by the Find My Catalyst game plan, your approach to goal setting and execution. If you'd like to learn more, head to findmycatalyst.com. Let's get to the conversation with Michelle. Michelle, it is awesome to see you. Thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Absolutely great to be here, Mike, and nice to have a deep and one-on-one conversation with you.
So we met through the Perch. How did you get involved in the Perch community?
You know, it's interesting. I had the opportunity to work with Valerie Cockrell first, and then Dan Cockrell a little bit later in my career at Disney. And Valerie and I just became friends. She was a contract facilitator with the Disney Institute. I was a director with the Disney Institute. And there was just something about the way that she told stories and brought her professionalism to everything that she did. I just admired her from day one. And so when I retired from Disney in 2020 and saw that Dan had this networking community out there called the Perch, I just knew that I had to be part of it because, you know, the depth of their experience, the passion they both bring to the forefront was something I really wanted to be a part of. And I'm not sure about you, Mike, but I actually told someone just yesterday that I have gotten 10x value out of this community for the little bit that you pay to be a part of it. It's just incredible. I absolutely adore the colleagues and peers that I've met through this group, including you.
Well, thank you. And it is an awesome community of people with diverse backgrounds and experiences. And what's really cool about the diversity that exists inside the community is when you share experiences with folks who are part of the community, they can ask questions, share their perspective that can help shift your perspective and help you overcome blind spots, which Dan and I've talked about a couple of times when he's been on the podcast before. And that overcoming blind spots as leaders inside an organization is something that I don't care what level of leader you are, how experienced you are as a leader, you will have those blind spots. They will exist. And if you don't think you have them, you probably have bigger ones than you even know. Sure. What are your thoughts on blind spots in leadership?
You know, I think first of all, a great question. I think it really boils down to transparency and just working in a culture where people, not just your leaders or a leader to the direct report, but people are comfortable sharing feedback. Because if people are comfortable sharing feedback, then you're probably not going to have as many blind spots because people are going to say, hey, you know, when you do this thing, it really upsets the team. Or when you do this thing, you're not resonating like you should. And so I really think that it starts with that transparency and that openness, because I believe that most people want to know how they're doing. They want to know where their blind spots are. And if someone were to tell me that you have this blind spot, it's not always pleasant to hear, but it's something that you want to hear because then you want to act on it and improve it.
And as you're going through that, I think one of the challenges that happens out there is people will say they're open to the feedback, and then people will share the feedback, but they don't listen to the feedback, or they don't hear things. They hear what they want to respond to rather than just taking it all in and start and learning from it. Why do we struggle with this?
Yeah, I think it's maybe a defense mechanism. But when you were painting that picture, first of all, we all know as leaders that your actions speak louder than your words. And so if you have a cast member in the case of Disney or even an employee that has the courage to step forward and give you that feedback, and that very first time you shut them down or you are defensive about the feedback, you are sending a signal that is far louder, far greater than the words, hey, I'm open for feedback. Tell me what you think. And so I think that as human beings, sometimes we just want to hear that we're doing great. And so there might be that little bit of a defense mechanism. But if you truly create that culture where the first time someone comes and says something to you and you're open to it and you act on it and you basically send that signal of, I just want to improve because I want to lead this team, this operation to the best of my ability, that ripple effect is going to be felt for years and years to come.
So let's talk about the Disney Institute. I don't know how many people are familiar with the Disney Institute. They might be familiar with Disney when they think of movies and they think of theme parks and they think of that kind of stuff. But what is the Disney Institute?
The Disney Institute is the external training arm of the Walt Disney Company. And many people are familiar with Disney University, which is the internal training arm, so training new cast members, new leaders, all of that. But Disney Institute, we work with intact organizations on things like culture, service, leadership, and just making, the communication strategy even stronger. And so and I keep saying I've been retired now from the Disney Institute for over a year, but the Disney Institute really helps organizations with intentionality. And so if you think about some of the things that we just talked about, even in terms of feedback, we help organizations not do things exactly like Disney does, but we help them think about how can they be more intentional or intentional to a greater degree so that they can help create a service environment that customers are going to really adore. They can help create a culture where employees are fully engaged, thus providing that service. And by the way, leadership is the first pillar in all of that. If that leadership domino doesn't fall, you're not going to have engaged employees and you're not going to have a sound service culture.
So why do organizations not invest or struggle with the idea of investing in leadership development other than the flavor of the month or the flash in the pan or hey, we're going to go ahead and have some trainer come in. They'll bring someone like you in or someone like me come in and talk about leadership. And then we go away and everything goes back to the way that it was. Why do organizations struggle with this?
Yeah, I think that you really hit on something because companies are willing to invest in their employees. They're willing to invest in people to come in and do leadership training. But if it's not integrated in the overall umbrella of the operation, of the culture, of what's being done on a day-to-day basis, no matter how good you are or I am in terms of the methodology and the communication and the training, it's not going to stick. And so I think that the reason why it doesn't stick, if I were to guess, is probably just the inherent speed of business. When leaders are focused on the tasks required to manage, on the results that need to come in every single day. And they're not necessarily taking that time to develop their cast members, their employees, or to say, okay, here's this new thing. And this culture shift is going to take time, but we're invested in it. And we're going to take that thread and we're going to make sure it's woven into everything that we do. Then it sticks. But I think it really comes back to if all you can afford to do in a day is get the tasks checked off, and get those results coming in, you're never going to really focus on development and culture and change.
Yeah. And we're creating this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy around this, or this vicious cycle that it creates this downward spiral because organizations will take on investment from venture capital groups. And then those venture capital groups will have an expectation around when that investment is going to turn around. And then, so that creates a level of urgency inside the organization that doesn't necessarily align with capability inside the organization, capacity inside the organization, or the market requirements that they're targeting. And I think what ends up happening, especially with leaders who take on this kind of investment, is they forget that in a lot of places, the money that's being invested, you're one of 10 bets. They don't necessarily care that you succeed. They care that one of the 10 succeeds. So now you've got this outside pressure that creates something that I know is really important to you, a level of chaos inside the organization. And you're in the middle of this giant storm. And it's really hard when you're in the middle of the storm and water's coming at you and everything else is out there to say, maybe I need to take a break and actually assess the situation. So how can we get better at that?
That's so well said. And you're right. When there's 10 things coming at you and you have to basically decide priority and focus. Every day it's priority and focus. What are you going to focus on? What are you going to prioritize? And if your leadership team is demanding these three things and I keep saying cast members, but your employees are demanding time and attention, but you've got these three things that have to be delivered, what's going to get the priority? What's going to get the focus? And so one of the things that we did talk about quite a bit at the Disney Institute, especially when we worked with those organizations that were hiring us to do, complete culture shift, complete culture change, is that you need buy-in from the very top. You need the executive team, the senior leadership team to say that this is important. When I talk about those three things that need to be delivered, guess what? This is going to be one of them. When we talk about how is this going within the team environment, this is going to be one of the things that we talk about. And so I think it really has to be a priority for the entire organization. And whatever that is, if it's customer service, that's a priority for the entire organization, or making sure that every single individual is developed and cared for, that's a priority for the organization. It has to start at the top, or else it's just going to continue to be shuffled aside in terms of that priority and focus.
In your experience, how many priorities can you have at once, either, I guess, as an organization or as an individual? I mean, take it in whatever direction you want, but like what's realistic when thinking about priorities? How many priorities can you have?
Yeah, I like that question. I don't know if I could put a number to it, but I'm sure you've heard the story, and I wish I knew who started it, because then I can give an attribution. Maybe you can put it in the show notes or something. But you've heard the story where a professor walks into a room, into a college classroom, I think it was, and he had a mason jar, and he had big rocks and small pebbles and sand.
Yep.
And basically the teaching point was that the only way you're going to get all of this into the jar is to start with the big rocks. Then you fill in the pebbles, and then the sand will fill in all the gaps in between. And so I think it really boils down to how many big rocks can a company afford to focus on and get in that jar so that everything else will fit in organically.
Yeah, it's a really powerful visualization. And the thing I would add to that, or suggest people think about, is if you're struggling with getting one big rock into the jar, don't find three big rocks. Like, either get a bigger jar or figure out a way to break your rock up or whatever it is, but don't go out and find other big rocks, because you've not demonstrated an internal capability to execute on one thing. And if you can't execute on one thing, you're really going to struggle executing on multiple things. And it just, so that visual, we'll find out where the original story came from, but it's just so powerful, because I know for me personally, if I'm in a situation where I've got a lot of stuff that's going on and I feel overwhelmed, my tendency might be to focus on some of the sand, because that's easy to just kind of brush away, move to the side, and put someplace else. And if I'm spending too much time there, I'm not getting the other important things done.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I think that's in some ways human nature, because let's look at the sand and the little pebbles. Those are fairly easy to accomplish. And then you've got this list where you've got a bunch of check marks and you've checked off a whole bunch of things, and you leave that day going, I got a lot done. But here's this big rock that is going to drive your business forward, or going to produce results for the clients that that's still sitting over there. And it'll probably be sitting over there tomorrow and the day after that too. So yeah, the big rocks are big for a reason. They're not the easiest to tackle. They might take a little bit of maneuvering to even get in the jar, but they're the ones that are going to give you the biggest bang for your buck.
Yeah, so and as you go through this, work with people, find other people who maybe have addressed that rock before, and they can make the rock a lot smaller, or whatever it is. Like, you're not alone. And I think the first book I read on this was probably Brian Tracy's book, Eat That Frog. And that's an old book. There are new books that will come out over the course of the next couple of weeks that will talk about the same thing. So this problem is not going anywhere. If you're constantly searching for a bunch of ways to address it, but not actually doing the work, you're probably doing yourself a disservice. So just go out there and get the work done. One of the things that we started talking about before we turned the microphones on was this idea of calming inner chaos. What does that mean to you?
So when we launched, and when I say we, it's my son and I, my co-founder, AJ Baker, my son, he's 26 years old. He is definitely the creative side of our duo. But one of the things we really wanted to focus on was this concept of inner chaos, because I'm a huge believer in the fact that if your mind is not right, and when I say not right, it could just be filled with stress. It could be filled with things that are keeping you from focus. It could be filled with worry, angst, anxiety, all of that. If you can't get your mind right first, it's going to be really difficult to lead yourself, much less lead other people. And so throughout the course of our first year in business, we came up with some programs and some content and some really aligned strategies to help people calm their inner chaos so they could pivot to health and strength and focus and clarity. But I think it's Robin Roberts that said, make your mess your message. And so helping people calm your inner chaos comes from a place of, I know that I'm not my best self if my mind is in chaos. And I've experienced plenty of chaos in my life. And I just know that the times I've been able to step forward is when I feel a lot of mental clarity. And the times that I've really held myself back is when there's inner chaos going on. So it comes from a perspective of passion, but also a perspective of, I've had experience with that too.
What are some of the practices you put into place to help get your mind right or create that space for yourself personally as you go through and navigate not only the chaos of starting a business and making a transition and raising kids, like all of this stuff? Like there's a lot of chaos out there. What are some of the practices you put into place to help yourself?
Yeah, I know it's a little bit different for everyone, but what works really well for me is what I call morning alignment. And so I start every day with journaling. In fact, I am a writer. And so I write sometimes pages and pages and pages in my journal. And I'm writing to me, for me. It's not to show anyone later. It's not to come up with lists. But journaling just to get my thoughts out first thing in the morning really helps. I immediately follow that with a brief meditation session just to kind of actually to go deep into this. I try to connect with that most aligned, deep, the best version of me possible. I actually see that version of me in my meditation, and I try to connect with that to carry that feeling throughout the day. And then I get into moving the body. I think that stretching and how you feel physically is a huge part. If you are, as an example, not moving very often, you're just sitting all day long, and you're also eating in a way that just puts you on a blood sugar roller coaster of spikes in energy, and then I crash, spike in energy, and then I crash. And I try to compensate for that exhaustion, that crash, through more food or caffeine or something along those. That doesn't work for me. And so to calm my inner chaos, I start with that really solid morning routine. I make sure I'm moving my body. I make sure I'm avoiding things that create my blood sugar to spike and crash. And then I usually have a pretty good day.
It's awesome. It is so powerful to create that level of consistency. I forget who it was. I think it was an admiral in the Navy who his book was something around like make your bed type thing. But actually, I think he spoke at a commencement speech for graduate students. If you make your bed, you've accomplished something. And every day you've accomplished at least one thing. So you make your bed. And what you've got to figure out, and make your bed might be corny for some people. So find your bed that you need to make, whatever that is, whether it's journaling. And I've struggled with journaling. I don't enjoy writing. And so I was working with someone, Aaron Wells, who is on Clubhouse usually on Saturdays when we do this Clubhouse Sales Radio thing. She and I were talking through it. And the guidance that came out of that discussion was just journal one word and like what you're thinking or feeling, and just write that word down. And what I ended up doing, because I'll write things down in threes, and then I'll pattern align some things that relate to those threes and just scaffold out. That's how my brain works. It actually had a really positive impact on sleep when I did that right before going to bed. It created this freedom. So there's something out there for you that you can figure out. You just have to actually go out and do it, not talk about doing it or think about doing it or read about doing it. Go out and do it. And I think Michelle shared some really good examples that can work for folks.
Yeah. I love your example as well, Mike, because I said at the beginning, everybody's different. And if waking up in the morning and writing pages in your journal just doesn't align with the best version of you, then don't do that. If you're someone that just needs to make sure that you calm inner chaos before you go to bed, as an example, do that. Find whatever works for you And then you mentioned the Admiral consistency. Do it consistently so that it becomes something that you have to do. The one thing I definitely advocate for people to try to get away from as much as possible is waking up in the morning and grabbing their cell phone and checking social media, the news, their email, all of that. I've been guilty of it too, but it almost like sets my mind into a space that is not aligned, because now I'm thinking task, 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 what needs to get done, what needs to get done, what needs to get done. And I'm not aligned with that peaceful, calm inner being. And so I think that it's, for many of the phones right there, you pick it up, you're like, let me just look really quick, see what's going on today. And next thing you know, it's 20 minutes later and you're in a rabbit hole.
And as you do it, you're being influenced by others rather than influenced by self. So, Michelle, you talked about this idea of best version of yourself. Mm-hmm. Let's say I'm out there and I'm struggling with figuring out what is the best version of myself. What if I just don't know what the best version of myself, because I've not taken the time to really think through some of the simple questions that are really hard to answer? How would you advise someone to start thinking about that question? What is the best version of myself? Or statement, this is the best version of myself. How do you go through that process?
Yeah, I think a big part of it is when, first of all, authenticity is huge. And so the best version of Michelle is not being someone that other people think is the best version of me, or it has nothing to do with success or title or anything that the external world is going to give me. The best version of me is when I look at myself, even internally, just look at myself and think, you know what? I'm really proud of you. And I just really like who you are. And when you're just being you, the real version of you, it lights me up inside. I just feel warm about the best version of me. And again, it has nothing to do with success or job title or, everyone around me is now giving me positive feedback. That's none of it. When I can look at myself and just think, I'm just really proud of who you are right now. And you are being an authentic, giving, kind, loving human being. That's the best version of me, if that makes sense.
It makes sense, and it's simple, and it's focused on you. It's this kind of look in the mirror, shine the light on me, things that I can control. Like I can control my attitude and I can control the effort that I put forward. So as I'm going through and looking at this, and I know that I can't control other people's attitude or effort, that's up to them. I can't control all of the noise that's out there. By being able to just ask some deep questions of yourself and say, hey, where do I go that gives me this energy where I feel warm inside? I feel excited. I think it's pretty powerful stuff. And unfortunately, I don't think a lot of us spend as much time doing it because we're caught up in all of that chaos that's out there that somebody else is creating, whether we create it ourselves because we pick up the phone right when we wake up in the morning, or we're diving into social media, or we're going wherever it is. So I think that's pretty powerful stuff.
Thank you. Can I share one thing? We were just talking about authenticity and, just being you, being the best version of you. I don't think I shared this with you, Mike, but can I tell the quick story about how we met, or at least my first impression or my first interaction with you, I should say?
Absolutely. Yes, please.
Because when we were talking about authenticity, this to me just felt like, the authentic version of you. We were on a Perch call, and it was actually the first time I had seen you. We had probably missed each other on previous calls, but you were this guy and there's, 15 squares on the screen, but you were this guy that was, interacting, and you had this whiteboard, just like you do right now. You had this whiteboard behind you, but on the whiteboard was a very interesting roadmap of some sort. It had metrics. It had, visuals. There was a path to it. So that in and of itself was cool. And I can't remember if I brought it up or someone else brought it up, but eventually Dan said to you, okay, we've got a few minutes left. Mike, put you on the spot. This was not part of the plan. And said, Mike, can you explain the roadmap behind you, or the whiteboard behind you? And in 2 seconds, you turned around and gave such a compelling and inspirational explanation of that roadmap, I just remember sitting there thinking, this guy gets it. He just gets it. This is a businessman. This is a motivator. This is a guy that really lives his authentic self, because you were not presenting to the audience. You were not, trying to get likes on social media. You were just passionately describing something that you were put on the spot to describe. So I think that that's just another example of when you're living your true self, when you're living within your authenticity, it's really easy to be put on the spot because you're just now talking from your heart.
Thank you. That means a lot. And it's awesome to hear it. That warms me up inside. I am super passionate and excited about putting things down on paper that people can execute on, and really simplifying some really complex ideas and concepts into next actionable steps. And the reason why I can be put on the spot to do it is not only because I'm passionate and excited about it, but it's because I've done this work and I know how it works. And it's not just about reading it in a book and watching it on TV or hearing somebody else talk about it. It's actually doing the work. And everybody has that capability. Everybody has done that. If they're mindful about the work that they're doing, they can map it out. They can describe what it looks like when you drive from Orlando to Tampa, or when you drive from Phoenix to Orange County. Like, what the path is. There's a couple of different paths, but if you've done it and you've looked at the map and you've gone through and you've had to get around obstacles, you can describe it and you know what the next logical step is there. Yet, for whatever reason, when we get into our business, we just start working. We start jumping on the hamster wheel and running and running and running and running and running. And we create this chaos, not only for ourselves, but for our team. So, Michelle, that was it was extremely meaningful. And thank you for sharing that. How do we as leaders create space for new leaders to gain these experiences in an environment that is, I want to be careful about this word, because sometimes people say safe and they think of safe spaces and all of that kind of stuff. But let's, practically speaking, inside organizations, as they grow, as people leave, as new people come in, how do we build better leaders inside our organization and identify better leaders? I think that could be an interesting discussion to get into. What are your thoughts on leadership development, building leaders, identifying leaders, helping people move through this path?
Yeah, that is actually the big rock, going back to that conversation, that we focus on at Stoneledge Enrichment, because we definitely see a gap. I saw a gap in my own career. I personally was fortunate because I had people that took the time to mentor me. When I first became a leader, they gave me not just the skills required to manage, but the qualities to lead other human beings. They took that time. But we definitely see that in business today, there's a gap because people are being promoted into those roles for the first time, in some cases before they're ready, in many cases because they're just great doers. They're great at walking into the job every day and getting their job done. Great work ethic, passionate about what they do. It's a big leap to now lead and inspire other humans, other people on the team. And in some cases, now you're leading people that used to be peers, even a bigger jump. And so how do we create a space for them to do that? I think that, in fact, what we teach is calm leadership. And it starts with collaboration. First of all, the company's got to carve out time. You have to understand that it's not just about teaching people to approve schedule requests and balance, the budget and open the store and close the store. You've got to carve out time to help them develop those leadership chops. But it starts with collaboration. And I had the privilege of working for Disney Cruise Line for 17 years. And 2 of those years, I was on board the ship as an officer. And a big part of my responsibility was training new officers. So people that went from crew to the officer level. And one of the things that I used to tell the new officers is you've got to collaborate with the people on your team. It is a hierarchy. They are going to look at how many stripes are on your shoulders, but you've got to learn to call them into your office when it's beyond just a coaching opportunity. Not just every time I call Mike into the office, he's in trouble. I call Mike into the office to say, hey, I'm thinking about switching it up on the menu tonight? I just wanted to bounce a few ideas off of you. Or, hey, I wanted to talk to you about, your interaction with a guest yesterday. That was brilliant. Tell me what was going through your mind because I'd like to share it with others. So collaboration is a big part of it. New leaders have to get comfortable with talking to their teams on a daily basis, coaching their teams on a daily basis. And coaching is telling people what they're doing right just as much as it is that performance side of the coaching equation. So it starts with collaboration. New leaders need to be curious. They need to ask a lot of questions and ask not just to get an answer, but ask to further their comprehension, to understand what's going on, to really get into the additional layers of any scenario. Then they need to listen. And we've all read books, I'm sure, about, listening not just to respond, but listening to understand. But as a quick example, when I was on the ship, I can tell you that 99.9% of the time, when I thought I understood a situation and was going to act on it, whenever I would ask a crew member, tell me a little bit about what happened, I always found out more, as long as I stopped to listen to what they had to say. And then the final one is for new leaders, even though they're brand new and they're struggling maybe with credibility or the speed of the business, is you've got to mentor everyone. You need to mentor those that are, for lack of a better expression, ladder climbers. They're just go-getters. They want to move up. You need to mentor that person that is happy in their position and be happy to stay there for the next 20 years. Because, Mike, people right now are leaving companies very quickly. And over 50% of the people that are leaving are saying they're leaving because of lack of development and lack of leadership. So if people can get those four things early in their development as new leaders, I think it's going to make a big difference in their long-term success.
How can organizations and people within organizations, we can look at it from both perspectives, but let's start with organizations. What can organizations do to improve mentoring or reinforce mentoring opportunities inside their business?
A couple of ways come to mind immediately. Again, going back to the analogy of the big rocks in the jar, they have to make it a priority. And more than just the words, it's not we're going to put this as one of our top priorities on our, AOP or the goals for the next 5 years. They need to make it a priority. And that means carving out the time. They need to carve out the time for coaches to, mentor the direct reports. They need to look at the emerging leaders within their own operation and develop them, sometimes informally, sometimes formally. At Disney, we had some just great programs for emerging leaders or for that top talent, that was looked at to move into senior leadership positions, to give them stretch assignments, to buddy them with someone that's been through the same rigors before. But I think it really boils down to time and commitment. You've got to commit to it as an organization. You need to make sure that it's important and that everyone in the organization understands how important that is.
Yeah, a really number of powerful things that were shared there. Like, it's one, making a decision to commit to it, then following through and creating the space and structure for it to happen. And one of the things that I didn't do very well early in my career, and I hope that I do it better today, and I'm very intentional about it, is I share where I'm spending time relative to personal development and seeking out mentors and engagement, either by sharing the story of a conversation that I have with mentors, showing that I've got a mentoring group, or sharing that I'm going to an event like Lee's mastermind that happens. And I've said to Lee and Jody, I will go to that mastermind every time they hold one. And it's not because something new comes out of the conversation. It's a shift in perspective comes from the conversation. And it creates an opportunity for me to create space in my own work where I'm investing time and energy and resource. I'm getting on an airplane. I'm sitting down with a group of leaders for an extended period of time. I'm shutting my phone off. I'm not engaging in the noise. And by sharing those stories, what I'm hoping is that people on the other end say, wow, if Mike's spending time doing it, it's okay for me to spend time doing it. Rather than telling people, hey, spend time doing it. You can say a lot of words, but if your actions don't align, as Michelle had said earlier, if your actions don't align with the words, you're going to create this disconnect inside the organization, a lack of trust, integrity, starts to fall and people won't believe that this is actually something that they can do. So share those stories.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things we talked about at Disney Institute, and I might not quote it perfectly, but people judge you based on your actions, and we judge ourselves based on our intentions. And so if my intention as a leader is to have people, going back to one of our earliest parts of, examples, if my intention is to have people give me feedback so I don't have any blind spots, but my actions are, I don't have time for you when you're giving me this feedback, or I'm being a little bit defensive, or even my body language is, who are you to tell me? Those are not my intentions. Those are my actions. And that's what people are going to respond to. And I think that really translates into pretty much anything you do as a leader. People watch what you do. And I love your example of, all right, so I'm going to take time to do this, but I'm going to tell my team I'm taking the time to do this because I think that, developing myself is important. I think I want my team to develop themselves. And so I'm going to say, I'm carving out time. And yes, I expect you to do the same. Those are your actions. And when they align with your intentions, that's a pretty powerful dynamic.
You get that warm feeling inside that you were talking about when you start to deliver this best version of yourself, and you have personal integrity. So let's talk about it at the individual level. So at an individual level, let's say I'm scared. I don't want to bring up that I'd like to find a mentor. I could use some help in finding a mentor because I believe that by saying this out loud to someone, they might see a gap that I have, a development need that I have. And because of my own insecurity, I don't want to publicly say that this is a challenge. So now I've got my own self-talk that's creating a gap for me to go out there and do the work. How can I, as an individual, get more comfortable with the idea of seeking out a mentor? And then what do I do next to go find those people?
So in terms of finding a mentor, I think that in many ways it is like finding a partner, finding a relationship, finding a best friend, because just seeing someone that has a certain degree of success and going to them and saying, can you mentor me? Even if they say yes, it's not always a right fit. And so what makes a good mentor relationship, I believe, is transparency. So if it's a mentor that just constantly tells you you're doing everything right and basically throwing sunshine at you all day long, you're never going to develop. So it has to start with transparency. Someone that is going to occasionally say, suck it up, buttercup, you can do this. You know you can do this. You need that person. So someone that really does have that transparency. The other part is someone that has a genuine interest in seeing you succeed, and a genuine interest, meaning they want to see you not only go up the ladder, but they want you to see you become your best self. They want to see you develop into that talented individual that the organization saw something in. You wouldn't be a leader if the organization, the company that you work for, didn't notice that there was something that you could contribute. So transparency, genuine interest in seeing you develop. And I think the other thing is just a communication style that aligns with you. And meaning, if you and I have the exact type of communication style, that may or may not be a good mentor relationship. It could be that I'm super chatty and you're more direct, but that just works for us. I've had the same best friend for 20 years. Her and her husband moved across the street when her oldest daughter is 6. My son was 6. And so we've been friends for 20 years. And on a typical phone call, if it lasts an hour, she talks for 45 minutes to 50 minutes, and I talk for 10. But that works for us. We both really enjoy that aspect of our relationship. So I bring that up because I don't think a mentor is the exact same type of communicator you are, but it's someone that you just find this nice mesh in terms of communication. That's when you know it's a good mentor relationship. So in terms of how to find that person, sometimes it's just understanding who you relate with now, who you feel good about now, someone that you respect, someone that you have seen go through some tough times and some good times, and they've done really well and come out on the other side in a very, integrated, integral way. Approach that person first. And if they've got the bandwidth, then you've got a match. If not, ask a few more people.
I think the couple of things that jumped out at me as you were talking. One, the importance of going out there and asking, just putting yourself out there, because what you'll find is for those who do want to see you succeed and have the time and believe that there's a fit, they'll invest and they'll be open to it. And they're not necessarily going to seek you out. They might, but when you're going out there and you're putting it out, if you don't ask, you're not going to get it. So if you don't ask, if you don't put it out there, nobody will know. The other one is be comfortable with the idea that this mentor-mentee relationship is a relationship. I have gotten so much more value out of the people who I've had a chance to mentor than the people who I worked with who were mentors for me. Yeah. And that sounds strange. And the reason it's real is because you start to realize things that you might have taken for granted that are just knowns to you that are unknown to others. And it can help with clarity of communication, and it can help with learning. And you get this energy and excitement when you see people be successful. You find someone who, as Michelle had said, has a genuine interest in seeing you be successful.
Yeah, agreed. That's brilliant.
Michelle, this has been an awesome conversation. We've covered a lot of things. We've covered the idea of chaos, the idea of learning, the idea of seeking out others, the reality that, hey, we all have blind spots, and it's really hard to get past those blind spots unless you start to shift perspective, and you can shift perspective with others. And we're all dealing with these challenges, and there's a lot of stuff that's out there. But if we can be true to ourselves and find that inner thing that helps us be that best version of ourselves, that warm feeling, then we know that we have that and we can move forward. Where can people find out more about what you're working on, and how can they connect with you directly?
Yeah, thank you for asking, Mike. We have a website that's very integrated, meaning that it addresses both calming inner chaos for the consumer, for the leader that's looking as an individual, and it also addresses our business solutions. So that is stoneledgeenrichment.com. And again, the different ways that people can interact. If you are an individual that knows that you are struggling with inner chaos, that you're struggling with energy or clarity, or you're just constantly masking, physical and mental exhaustion through, caffeine and food, alcohol, distraction, whatever it is, then there's programs that we have that can help you right now. And so that'll be part of the landing page, the Mind Body Detox, Mind Body Detox Plus. And on a limited basis, I also work with individuals in that regard. From a business solution perspective, it is all about calm leadership, helping those next-gen leaders get really comfortable with leading other human beings. So again, not the tasks required to manage, but the skills required to lead. And that is within the website too. We have a button for business solutions, and I'm happy to interact on a keynote workshop or even an advisory consultative service. So it's something I'm really passionate about doing. I bring a lot of that Disney DNA to the solutions, and because it's my experience and my exposure. So stoneledgeenrichment.com is probably the best way to go.
Perfect. And we'll include links in the show notes. If you know of someone who would benefit from this conversation, find value in the discussion that Michelle and I just had, please share it and let us know via LinkedIn and Twitter. Sales is a thinking process. Life is a thinking process. Business is a thinking process. How are you thinking differently about your process?